Buenas tardes. That's all the Spanish I have. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tricia King, and I work for CASE. I have worked for CASE for 4 months, so I'm the new girl at CASE. My microphone is not quite there. Can you hear me now? I'll keep going. So I've worked for CASE for 4 months. 5 continents. I have been to 5 different continents in 4 months, meeting. Do I need to stop? Because can you hear me without the microphone? No. Okay. Come and sort this microphone out, please. What am I doing wrong? It was working in tests, but it keeps coming and going, doesn't it? Should I keep going? I'll keep going. That's better. So, 4 months I have worked for CASE. Okay, I'll use that. It's probably better. Thank you. That's been a long 4 months, isn't it? I'll go again. My name is Tricia King. I work for CASE. I have worked for CASE for 4 months. And in 4 months, I have been to 5 continents where I have met fabulous people like you. People who believe that universities, higher education, are the vehicles with which we can change the world. Now, before I worked for CASE, I worked for 4 different universities, as I think Liz said in Spanish, which I didn't quite understand, but I think she told you that I have worked for many universities in my career. And so, for nearly 20 years, I have been a volunteer for CASE. So although I'm quite new to the organisation as a member of staff, I am not at all new to working for universities, and I have mostly been your side of the audience, the people who make our universities fly and flourish, and hopefully we can change the world. Now, I believe in the power of storytelling. We saw some fabulous storytelling going on the stage today. And I think every single one of us in our profession is engaged in the business of storytelling. Whether you are trying to persuade your rector that he should invest in your organisation and in your department and in what you do. Whether you're trying to convince donors that they should give you money to help your institution to flourish. Whether you're trying to persuade students that they should come and study with you, whether you're trying to persuade government that they should change their policies or create a tax regime that helps you raise money in your country. Storytelling is at the heart of our business, whether you're a fundraiser, alumni relations, marketing or communications. I believe the thing that connects us is the power of storytelling. So I'm going to start by telling you my story. Now, this gorgeous creature up there with the very beautiful ginger hair, that's me. And that's me there too. Why do I show you these photographs? Because my personal story of going to university is one of transformation, and it's why I believe it can happen, because it happened to me. I am the child of Irish immigrant parents. That's where the hair came from. So I grew up, and my parents came to London as economic migrants. They were intent on a better life for their family. And by coming to London, they gave opportunity for their children to go to good schools. And when I was at school, so none of my family have had an education. They're bright, clever people, but they had no opportunity to get an education, and nobody had been to university. So when I was at school, somebody said to me, do you know, you're quite clever. If you wanted to, you could go to university. And I said, well, university, what's that? What's that all about? I have no idea. No one I know goes to university. But that's what I did. And I think the point at which I started at university began to transform my life. I met people, I met ideas that I would not have come across had I not had that opportunity to have an education. And my belief is it doesn't stop there, because the next photograph, these are my beautiful children. So this is the moment where the guy who was doing the mime would sort of do something like this. Because these are my babies. Now, each one of those, as a direct result, I think, of having a mother who was educated, expected that they would go to university. It wasn't a choice. It was just part of their life expectation. So I have children who went to Oxford University, the University of Manchester, and the University of Nottingham. Now, I guess you don't know those universities particularly, but they are high quality. Working as, oh, no, there it goes. Just keep going, the technology will get there. So they went to good universities. You know, that they were the sort of children who grew up in a middle-class professional household because my husband and I both had professional jobs because we had gone to university. So their expectations, just one generation on, their expectations were completely different to mine when I was growing up. They all have good jobs now. So these are my children at the point at which they were their graduation ceremonies. You know, that's the point at which they became, one of them is a lawyer, one of them is a teacher, and one of them is an economist. So in 2 generations, opportunities, lifestyle, transformation happened because somebody at school one day said to me, do you know you're quite clever and you could go to university? So this has completely influenced what I have done for most of my life because I believe this translates the light bulb moment, the moment when you know that university can transform lives. And if they transform lives, they transform society and they transform nations. That was my decision that this was what I was going to do with my life. I was going to work with universities and work with students to persuade them that they should go to university, and work with universities to persuade them that they should take all sorts of students into their ranks that they might not normally have thought about. So that light bulb moment has created my career, and it's why I'm here today. I work in London. This is a clue, just very visual. I'm a Londoner, out and out, worked in London for the last 15 years. And 2 of the universities that I've worked with in London, they were very keen on taking non-traditional students like me and giving them an opportunity to train and do a degree and actually transform their lives. Now, this is my college until 4 months ago, I was, as Liz described, the pro-vice master. I was on the leadership team of a college of the University of London. Now, it's a world-class, research-intensive university. In all the world rankings, it's in the top 100 universities in the world. But the very different thing about Birkbeck was that it taught in the evening. So students of all ages and students of all backgrounds came to study at night. Many of them were adults with children and jobs. So the youngest students were 18, and the oldest student who graduated at Birkbeck was 103 years old. And everything in between. And London is a very multicultural city, and so people of all backgrounds, all races, all life expectation came to study with us at Birkbeck. So this, for me, in many ways, was the perfect university because it didn't compromise on quality. World-class professors, world-class teaching, but everything taught in the evening. So that was a university that really believed in transforming lives. We used to have adverts on the tubes and the trains in London that said, can a bus change your life? This one can if you go to Birkbeck. So it's London. And the microphone is going again. I'm just going to keep going. So I have huge expectations about what the purpose of a university is. And I've spent years working with universities all over the world, and in the last 4 months I have been to every continent. And as far as I can see, the purpose of the university, wherever it is in the world, is to do the same things. So this is what I believe a university does. It helps individuals achieve their potential, that it's not about where you started, but it's about where you're capable of going. I believe it's about building society, because people who come to universities, they study, they learn things, they get to know each other, and they create a civilized society. Universities help create civilized society. They create the possibility of social mobility. That's what happened to me. It's what happened to many people like me, whose parents didn't go to university, but they did, and they take the chance. It's about being at the heart of change and challenge. In our universities, we have the best thinkers in the world. So if we're trying to change the world, we have people in our communities who know how to do that. And I really believe, I was in Africa. I've spent quite a lot of time in Africa. And in Africa, the African nations will tell you that universities in Africa are in the business of nation building, that the future of some of the countries in Africa, they believe their future is educating their young people so that in 10 and 20 years' time, those countries will look different to how they do today. I believe all our universities, in however sophisticated a country we live, we are engaged in the business of nation building. Universities are anchor institutions in our cities, in our regions, in our countries, in our continents. They are at the heart of everything that is happening in society, or at least they should be. In our research activity, I've always worked in research-intensive universities. So in universities, good people are pushing back the boundaries of knowledge. We are learning how to make the world a better place. In the universities that I've worked with professors who are looking for a cure for cancer, who are researching infant mortality, finding out why babies die too young, looking for solutions to global warming, looking at how you build a strong economy, how to combat terrorism. That's a very big question in London right now. And most recently, what is it makes us happy? I was working with a professor who was exploring, a very serious research activity about what makes us happy. And I think for me, that's as equally important to some of the challenges of global warming and cures for cancer. So I create very high expectations for what it is universities should be doing and how we should be transforming the world. And 4 months of travel in 5 different nations, what I've learned is that universities across the world are challenged in very similar ways. So governments all over the world, in the UK, in my own country, they're cutting funds because they're coming out of world recession and they're trying to find ways of making the future add up. And so universities all over the world are losing money because governments can no longer afford it. But yet expectations of what a university do remains high, despite the fact that funds are being cut. As far as I can see, across the world, that culture of we need to do more for less exists in every university that I've visited. So universities need to find ways to be agile and fleet of foot and find new ways to bring income streams. They need to be agile and they need to be entrepreneurial. And this is where you come in, because I think CASE believes in the power of you. You are part of a community professionals who can help universities achieve the things that universities need to achieve. At CASE, we are examining our future and wondering what we should do in the next few years. So that phrase, we are engaged in advancing education to transform lives and society. That's what we believe we are in business to do at CASE. And all over the world, people like you, whether they are fundraisers, alumni relations, marketing or communications people, they are working really hard with their institutions to help them flourish. So what are the sorts of things that people are doing? So they're working with their alumni community, their former students who often are still in the country or in the city. They're bringing those alumni back into their life and they're saying, can you help my student get a job? Can you advise them on how to write a CV or a job application or practice a job interview? Can you volunteer at an open day? Can you help students when they're thinking about whether they should come to study? And for our alumni, yes, can you give us money to make some of these things work? But it's not the only thing. Alumni relations is not just about fundraising. If we get it right, our alumni community will be at the heart of our organisation, helping us tackle our challenges and find the right future. People like you are engaged in building reputation and building community around your institution. Does your community understand what you do, what matters to you, what your challenge is, and how do we, as a community of professional practice, bring those communities into our institutions and build reputation? How are we helping our institutions attract the right students? Students from home and students from overseas. That is very much our business. We are attracting donors, we are attracting partners to help our institutions flourish. My job in London, I did a lot of working with government to help change policy that allowed my institution to flourish. So I've done a lot of government relations and I see that happening all over the world. And managing crisis communications. I've talked to a few people who tell me this isn't such a big deal in Mexico, but in America right now, and in the UK right now, and in South Africa right now, universities are in crisis, and communications professionals are helping them sort them out. So I thought I might show you, these are some images of places that I've been in the last few months. These are things that are happening in the world right now. So in America, there are race issues going on campus where the students are campaigning, and this guy, who was a president in the Missouri system in the States, lost his job because the students were campaigning because they felt he wasn't dealing with race issues very effectively. It was in South Africa when this march was happening, when the students were saying to the government, we don't want to pay fees anymore. We can't afford to pay fees. We want you to cut fees in all the universities in South Africa. And the government was listening because the government was due for re-election in about a year's time. Young people in South Africa vote. And so they were saying to the young people, maybe we will cut fees so that you won't have to pay. And the universities in South Africa were saying, well, how does that work? How do we operate without funding? So people like you in those countries are dealing with those issues. I put that image in just because that was London. A few years ago, the government in the UK withdrew funding from universities almost completely, and the fees went up threefold, so from £3,000 to £9,000 a year. And this was the march of students outside the Houses of Parliament when the legislation that allowed government to withdraw funding from universities and put the fees up was happening. So people like me were dealing with those sorts of crisis communications happening in my university, which was about 10 minutes walk from there. This is in South Africa, where I was a couple of weeks ago. I don't know whether you know the story. Cecil Rhodes in South Africa, the students felt that he represented everything that was wrong about the colonial history of South Africa. So they lobbied the Vice-Chancellor and they said, we want you to take this statue down. We think he represents things that we don't want to know about in our university. And he was persuaded. So this was the Cecil Rhodes statue being removed from the University of Cape Town. Meanwhile, in Oxford, this is another Cecil Rhodes statue, and Oxford decided the students tried very hard to persuade the senior team to take it down, and they refused. So Cape Town gave in to the students and said, this feels right to us, and Oxford said, no, we're not taking him down. And this is the sort of fundraising piece that goes on, because CASE is very expert in fundraising, but it's not the only thing we do. We are engaged in all these communities of professional practice, but we're really good at helping people learn to do fundraising. University of Sydney, Cambridge in the UK, University of Harvard in the US, Nottingham in the UK, and Boston College, because my friend from Boston College is here, so I felt we ought to at least, so Ellen Sullivan, who's at the back from that college, I thought I'd put a picture up to make her smile this afternoon. So people in our world, people in our professional practice, the things that I have done all my life, the things that you are doing right now, we are bringing about change. We are supporting our institutions to flourish. And I arrived in Mexico on Sunday. I've never been here before, and I have loved your country, and I have particularly loved your people who are warm and friendly, and I love the fact that you don't shake hands and you just kiss complete strangers. Love that. But the things that I was told when I arrived is that Mexico is challenged. You know, oil prices are falling. You have problems with drugs, you have problems with violence, you have problems with social justice. And I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's part of your recent history. But the thing I experienced was an energy and a passion and a determination that you were going to do something about it and that your universities could help. And some of the statistics people gave me, you know, the International Monetary Funds say that the foreign direct investment into this country rose by 25% in 2015. So there are people out in the world who believe they should be investing in Mexico, that you're a country worth paying attention to. And in Latin America, the population is growing and it's young, it's middle class, and the demand for university is going through the ceiling. Brilliant, I say. University is the heart of the answer. And I love this quote from the OECD, which I can't quite read. So it says, to achieve greater prosperity for its population and to continue to reduce income inequality, that not only must higher education be more accessible to all sectors, but the quality of that education must be improved and aligned with standards of developed or high-income nations. So the OECD agrees with me that universities are the way to change the world, that universities are the answer. So, I'm just coming to a conclusion now. this for me is about, if universities are in the business of nation building, and universities are anchor institutions in every country that I have visited in the last few months, if universities are the answer, then it is our job, your job, my job, to support them. And I believe that you are the change agents in your institutions. And I believe that you can really help, because I have seen people like you help in other parts of the world. And so the question for CASE now is, what is it we can do at CASE to help people like you help your institutions to flourish? And so we are making a renewed commitment to Latin America. We are going to appoint a director who will be based in this city. We are going to change our programming, and we're going to try and scale up what we do. We had a fantastic consultation with some of the volunteers this morning with ideas about what CASE will do in this country and in Latin America in the next few years. Because I really, this is my life. I believe that universities are at the heart of our future. And I believe that people like you can make a difference. And I believe that we are here to help flourish. And before this microphone completely gives up, I'm going to finish. But I'm very happy to take questions or to talk further about any points that you've heard. But thank you all very much. Either. Anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask?
¿Preguntas? ¿En inglés o en español? ¿Nadie tiene ninguna pregunta? ¿Ninguna pregunta? Sí, a ver, una pregunta.
Sí, buenas tardes. Soy Filipa Nuttall del Institute of International Education. My question is, could you tell us anything about the new programming you're thinking of for this region? And does it include the Caribbean as well as North Central and South America?
The programming is in an embryonic consultation, but the conversation we had this morning is that there are two stages to this. One is about how do we build our profession, how do we provide some basic, how do you do fundraising, how do you do alumni relations, how do you do marketing, how do you do communication, really basic seminars and materials translated into Spanish. So it's about creating collateral in Spanish and running seminars alongside that. So that's sort of, how do you get this thing off the ground? How do you grow the profession? And the other conversation was about how do we engage with our rectors? How do we engage with government? How do we engage with senior donors? And so there were two levels. And what sort of Spanish language materials could we produce that would demonstrate the value of what we do to our rectors, to government. So at the moment, it's a two-track approach. One is about growing, bringing new people into the sector and growing the skill set. The other is about how can we support institutions to persuade their rectors, to persuade government, to persuade senior donors to engage in this program. And does it include just about anywhere in this? Yes, it does. But our belief is that if we try to do all at once, we will fall over. So the idea is that we will build this slowly. It will probably start predominantly in Mexico, and it will build out as people want the programming and the sort of community grows. But is there any restriction geographically? No. Will most of it happen probably here and in the surrounding countries initially? Yes. But you know, I worked in the UK 20 years ago. In the UK, people would say to me, we don't know anything about fundraising, we don't do it here. And 20 years later, it's quite sophisticated, and our sector is a very mature sector. So when I talk to people here, it feels like how it was in the UK a few years ago. And I believe that we can support this community to become a more mature and a bigger sector. We have an ambition that in a few years' time, there's a whole lecture theatre behind those curtains. In a few years' time, the aspiration is that we fill this entire lecture theatre with people like you, working in schools and universities in Latin America. That's the dream.
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
I'm very happy not to answer any more because I've got to get on a plane and go back to London tonight. But can I say, I have really loved meeting you all. I will be back in true hasta la vista style. I will be back. I will be back in Mexico City, and I will be back to meet you all again and to watch our community of practice grow and our universities get stronger. Thank you all very much.
Gracias, Tricia. Quédate aquí. Stay right here. Sin duda, tu participación es un firme pilar y motor de arranque para este Congreso CASE América Latina 2016. Gracias.
I got a certificate.
Yes. Muchas gracias.